This video takes you through the process of activating RSVPMaker, setting a couple of essential settings, and then creating your first event or events. So when I activate this, it prompts me for a few things. Because of the GDPR regulations, we want to decide whether our site should include a checkbox on the site on all RSVP forms asking if people want to consent to our privacy policy. And of course, we need to go through the process of setting up privacy policy to do that. So I'll turn that on. It also says that I need to set the time zone for the website. And that's important because RSVPMaker actually needs to know what time zone you're in order to know whether the date and time for an event has gone past. So by default, it's really set to UTC 0 or GMT time, basically. We're going to set it to be New York Eastern Standard Time. And the final thing is it's telling me that I need to go in and create a calendar page. I can do that with one click just to create a default calendar. And we are in WordPress 5 with Gutenberg active. So this shows up as a Gutenberg block, the component that displays an events listing and can also display a calendar. So the default here is set to be yes, show the calendar plus an events listing. And we don't need to narrow it by type or anything. It's going to show 10 events per page. So that's great. We don't have any events yet, so that's not terribly useful. But if we go out here, we'll see blank calendar. So let's go ahead and fill that in. So we'll go to New Event. And rather than going straight to the post page, particularly for the Gutenberg edition, I try and prompt people first of all to make sure that they set a headline or title for their event and the date and time of those event. I'll show you how those kind of can get lost in the mix. So my test event, we'll make it a couple of weeks from now, or we could navigate through this little calendar widget to figure out the date. Set the time that this starts. Optionally, the duration. There are some things like here's an add to calendar icon you might want to turn on. And you can set defaults for these on the settings screen. I'll go back to that a little bit later. Time zone is relevant, particularly if you are advertising online events such as webinars. You might want to let people know what time zone, and there's a time zone conversion button. So we'll turn all those things on, and we do want to collect RSVPs. Now it is possible to publish events that are just announcement events. When you turn on RSVPs, then you get a registration form to go with. Okay, so now we have a blank event. It does have the date filled in, the date and the time, and RSVPs turned on. There is also a link here to the other options that we have to set. So there's a lot more options that you can set for your registration deadline, pricing, if you're going to charge for the event. Those would be on that separate screen, which is also a link up here at the top. So we can always navigate over to set those events, but first we would want to tell people why they want to show up. And typically to spell. Typically you would want to have the location, maybe some contact information where people can call for questions. You would want to have that all laid out, but you can use any kind of content that you would use in a blog post or any other piece of WordPress content within the body of your post. So you set it up, you tell people why they should come, and we can publish this and go out and view it. We see we have now a basic event set up with our promotional copy, the date, the time, the duration, the links that allow me to add to Google Calendar or to Outlook. And we have a basic form set up. So this is the default form, which asks first name, last name, email, a phone, and asks you what type of phone number it is. You could also have different fields in there for home phone and work phone, whatever information you want to gather. That's all customizable. And for guests, by default it's just first name and last name, but again, you could prompt them for additional information. Here's our privacy policy checkbox. Remember, we said that we would set that up to be included on our forms. So I can submit this. That's going to tell me I've got a couple of fields left blank. Because I'm logged in, it already picked up my email address. But I need to at least put in my first and last name, and maybe I'll invite my wife to this wonderful event as well. If I wanted to add more guests, I can do that. And so, try this again. And we get a confirmation message that's also going to be sent back to me by email. So I'll get a confirmation as the person registering, and then the person who organized the event, which in this case is me, also gets this notification saying RSVP yes via email. On the WordPress dashboard, under RSVP events, there's also this RSVP report. So we can come in here, we can get a listing of everybody who has signed up so far, their options to format for printing, and there's also a way of downloading some of that information to a spreadsheet, a CSV. Suppose we want to make that event a little bit more elaborate. Maybe we'd like to charge for it. So now we've got to go back into our settings and start to change some of the defaults perhaps. So there are a number of options in here. We can change based on when we usually meet. We can change the standard time of our events. We can say that by default RSVP should be on, registration should be collected. There's an option to do a captcha or reCAPTCHA if you would like to do that. Lots of options, you can customize the look of the RSVP button by changing some of this inline CSS here. But if what we want to do is collect money, what we want to do is set up the options for either PayPal or Stripe. This is the keys that I've gone into. I've signed up for a Stripe account. It's a payment service very similar to PayPal, but has good APIs that I enjoy working with. I can make sure that I'm going to get a notification through RSVPMaker every time a transaction comes through, because Stripe only sends me kind of minimal information. Just it tells me the amount, it tells me the email address of the person who RSVP'd, and I'd like to make sure that that's associated with this person who has just registered. So I want the RSVP information and the payment information to be merged together. Alright, so I've put in my keys, and then if I go back to this event now, and I'm going to come into the editor, I'm just changing the content of the event. Actually, where I want to go is over to the options page. And again, there's a long list of options. A lot of these things, the defaults can be set from the settings page. If we scroll down a little bit, we have a whole section on payments. We see that Stripe is enabled, PayPal is not right now. And we have to give a name to whatever it is that we're charging for. So we're going to give this event actually 2 prices. So this is a dinner. There's the early bird rate, $45 USD until this date. So I'll put it in year, month, day format. And then we can have the dinner, the full price version. They'll be listed after that. If we now go view the event, we should see that there's actually a choice here of which price I want, and we could have more choices than that. We could have the special cocktail reception or something, but here we're going to sign up for the $45 fee. Again, I have to consent on privacy, so I'm updating this event, and this time it's coming up with a pay by card button. It does show me that I'm in test mode. No. We're going to go ahead and pay using this phony card number. And we should get back a confirmation message saying thank you. In this case, again, it's telling me it's a test transaction, but the real transaction would work just the same way. So there are levels of additional things we can change here. Again, we can go back to the options page. We can change a number of things away from the defaults in terms of maybe instructions that appear on the form. There are lots of different options there. So this is instructions for user would be some kind of prompt like we're signing you up for a potluck dinner. So make sure you put in the notes field what you're going to be bringing for dinner. We have that, and then we can navigate from the options screen back to the event, and we also have some options here to customize the confirmation message. For example, I do a number of events that are webinars rather than physical events. So for the confirmation message, we want it to be something different than just thank you. We would want it to include the links. Now the confirmation and reminder messages are actually set up as posts that you view in the editor. So this is not a piece of content that would be published or visible on the website, but you can use the exact same editor you would use for a blog post, once again to edit the message. So we could have a much more elaborate confirmation message. You do have to remember that the confirmation message is meant to be set out by email, so certain multimedia things that say rely on embedded iframe code might not work. There is something for YouTube specifically where it will swap out any iframe code with something that will work in an email. So from here we have this is actually showing us that this is the default confirmation message as opposed to one that is customized for that event. And if we look down here, we'll actually see that there's an option to edit the default message. So that would be if we want to change the default, the thing that every new event will inherit, or we can customize for this specific event. So maybe for this event, we're meeting at a different location, we're meeting under different circumstances, so there's additional instructions that you want to provide. So in this case, it's going to create a separate post. Instead of confirmation default, it says confirmation 12, referring to the post number, and we can put in some extra special info and update that. Now when we're in one of these related documents, there's a navigation back to the parent event. So back to viewing the parent event or editing the parent event up here. So we're trying to give you ways of not getting lost as you navigate through these things. So we can go back to edit the parent event. And we also have an option here to edit or customize the RSVP form. So maybe we don't want to use the standard form. Maybe we need to prompt for some additional information. So the RSVP form is set up to appear in the editor, and you can customize it to include some additional fields, some different fields. By default, it prompts for guests, but for example, if you were doing a webinar, then you don't really bring guests with you to a webinar. They don't have to be registered separately, so we could just remove that whole block. Or there are other examples where you might want to include something specifically for the guests to provide information. An example of that is a parent and child event, where for the children you're going to ask for their grade level. So to do that, we would just look for, if you put in RSVP field, it will show you your options for things to include on the form, and we could put in grade level. As an option that will be prompted to be filled in for each guest, and it's already toggled to include on guest form, so we can go ahead and update that. And it's saying view post here, but here we would just be viewing the form itself. Really what we want to do is be able to navigate back to the parent event and see how that event has changed. And we should see that the form has changed so that the guests are now asked for information about their grade level. So we really have several sets of related documents. Now the default form and the default confirmation message can just be inherited to all your events. They don't necessarily have to be customized for each individual event. So the record would just track the ID number of that post for the confirmation message or for the form. Now, one other option we have when we're creating events is, rather than creating just a single event, I might want to create a template. And the difference here is a template, instead of asking for a specific date, it's going to ask for a schedule. So the schedule can be something like every Friday, or it could be the last Friday of the month, or it could be the second and third second and fourth Friday. So we can create a template that lays out all of our boilerplate information. If we typically ask for RSVPs, we can turn that on. If we typically want to show the calendar icons, we can turn that on, and so forth. So when we create this RSVP, again, it's initially just creating it as a draft. We would go in and put in my boilerplate details, so place, directions, who to contact. And then when we publish this, we haven't really published anything that's visible on the site yet. We just have this model, so I can compare it to the cookie and the cookie cutter. We've created the cookie cutter. You don't eat the cookie cutter. You want to stamp out cookies, and then you can decorate those cookies all a little bit differently. And the way we do that is after updating this template, it's going to say create, update events based on the template. So we can check off a couple, or we can check off them all. So this is projecting out several months in advance what that schedule would amount to. I think we had it as second and fourth Friday. So it's projecting out those dates. We can go in then and edit any of those individual dates. So if it's an event where you have speakers, the individual date would include details about the speaker. And of course, this, instead of saying second Friday, it's showing the specific date here. So we could change the date, the time. We can change these things all independently. But we're actually still maintaining a connection back to the template. So we can always go back and edit the template and regenerate these events if we want them all to be the same. Well, let's just see for a moment how that works out. So if I customize this a little bit and I update that, so again, I can go back to my template or my template options. So this has this extra line here, custom info goes here. I go back to the template, it's all the same. Now notice when I'm working in a paragraph, one of the reasons I have those opening screens to get you to set the basic parameters is when you're working on a particular part of the document, it covers up the properties for the whole document. But you can click on document to see that, so we can see that we're working now in the template as opposed to an event for a specific date. When we update this, once again we get that create update events prompt. And it's actually going to show us that this one, it was modified independently of the template. And so we can check them all off, but maybe we made some customizations there that are important, that matter. We don't want to overwrite them. So we have fair warning. We can update all the rest of them to include our new boilerplate details, and then maybe we would go back and edit that particular one individually. So now if I look on my event screen in the editing mode on the dashboard, it shows me all the events that are projected out that are available for me to work with. Here are all my model events that were based on that template. And we can go through and view any of those. So there's the individual event. If you look on the calendar, we're all also see that these are all projected out. Here are Friday events. If we went into May, we would see a couple more Friday events, and so on through the year. So that's a little bit about how the events, the templates, the sign-up forms, the confirmation messages, they're all supposed to work together. You can set defaults along the way, but you can make customizations for each individual event so that it